here from the Kiwimana Buzz, and today we've got Kevin Ingram from the BK Corner and Phil Chandler, the Barefoot Beekeeper. So how's it going, guys? And yeah, how's it going?
I'm good.
Going good.
Yeah. And maybe we just go around the room and tell each other, tell the audience about what we're doing and who we are. So maybe start with Phil.
Sure, okay. I'm Phil Chandler. I'm in the UK, in England, to be more specific, southwest England. I'm probably best known for what we call natural beekeeping. Let me start that sentence again. I'm probably best known for what we call natural beekeeping over here. And I use mostly top bar hives, but I do play around with other hives as well. Purely out of interest. I don't really do any honey production at all, except a little bit for my own use, family use, and friends, and so on. And my interest is in bees and how to go about keeping them in a way that is gives them as much freedom as possible to do what bees do, and still allow us to have some sort of interaction with them. So that's really it, top and bottom.
Oh, fantastic. And Kevin, you're from New Jersey, aren't you?
I am. I live in New Jersey, central New Jersey, just west of the Pennsylvania border. I'm a hobby beekeeper. What do they call them? Serious sideliner, as they say. I only have 3 hives right now, but I'm looking to go up to 10 hives this year, and doing this since 2008. And I have a beekeeping podcast at bkcorner.org, and do a lot with the state, local beekeeping associations.
Fantastic. And well, I'm Gary. I'm sort of a sideline beekeeper as well. We've got 15 hives at the moment, and yeah, we try and do ours without using chemicals at all. So, but we're using mainly Langstroth hives at the moment. We're probably looking at doing some bench hives later on. Over winter we'll make some. Give that a go. Yeah, and so to start off things, we've got a video from Dr. Peter Thiel that Kevin wants to talk about. What was it, a recent conference, Kevin?
Yeah, in January I went and attended the American Beekeeping Federation conference at Hershey, Pennsylvania. And it's one of those things where when you leave, your head hurts because there's just so much stuff that's going on. You can't possibly see it all. Everything from commercial guys that have the largest operations in the United States to beekeepers like myself who have only a handful of hives, and everything in between. They have standard regular tracks that you can go through and learn many different things. They have scientists locked in the basement where they just talk about research that isn't even released yet, and they have different tracks that just cover the industry itself. The fascinating one that I wanted to talk about was out of the USDA Agricultural Research Service, Gainesville, Florida lab. Dr. Peter Thiel did a presentation on Friday afternoon. I almost missed this. I had another presentation that I just kind of had fatigue, and I went up to the general session room to sit it out and took in this presentation. And let me tell you what it was, and I just covered this on my podcast, which got released this week. They have the answer to the small hive beetle and varroa mite problem, or at least the closest that I've seen since I've been involved in beekeeping. They've come up with this method, at least for the small hive beetle, where they found out that they can build and attract it like a lure that is so strong that it'll actually draw the small hive beetle out of the ground and into the trap, almost like a Japanese beetle trap, but it'll literally draw the small hive beetle out of the hive itself. And they've been able to figure out that they could use cantaloupe, but in Florida the cantaloupe rot right away. So it's attractive for a moment, and then it's not attractive anymore because it's rotted. Well, they can isolate the chemical from that and use that and create a synthetic blend, and they're working on a product for that. The other thing that they had was a plexiglass contraption that you put on the front of the bottom board, and you catch the larvae as they're crawling out of the hive. And the larvae, if you could stop them from getting in the ground and pupating, then you're going to prevent them from becoming adults, and you could put a serious dent on the small hive beetle population in your apiary. The $1 million one was that they took old hive beetles and they put them in the soil, and they had this big tub, and they had fresh soil, not polluted at all with hive beetles, and old, and they discovered that the larvae would only go in the fresh soil, would not go in the old. And they determined that the small hive beetle carcasses in the soil from pupating was what kept them from doing it. So the key thing that they did was they took all these small hive beetle carcasses and they put it in a pan. They drew a line straight through the middle of the pan, and they took all this larvae and they put it in one side, and they let them go to see what would happen. Not one of them would crawl across the carcasses to get to the other side. They were stacked 5 deep, but they would not crawl. That was really, really cool what they did. So then they took the larvae and they mixed it with pentane, the crushed old shells, and they sprayed half of a disc about the size of a pizza, and they put the larvae on it. None of them would crawl to the other side. Then they took this same thing and they put the larvae straight down on the part that got painted, and they all crawled off to the free side. So they're pretty clear that they can create this attractant that will do push-pull for small hive beetle, and it's such a big problem for certain parts of the United States. Then, to top it off, and I said in the podcast it was a lot like an infomercial where, wait, there's more. They asked this question, what is it that the varroa mite is attracted to inside the hive? Is it the larvae? Is it the brood? Is it the honey? What is it? Well, it turns out the answer is it's the adult bee. Straight out the adult bee. So then they took the adult bee, and this is a little bit squeamish, but they basically wrung it out. They separated the juices of the bee from the solids of the bee, and they put the solid in. I have to say hi to my wife in the background. There's Sharon. You always hear on my podcast.
Hey, Sharon.
Hi, Sharon.
Hello, everyone.
You're now internationally famous, Sharon. I had to mute the thing because she was singing in the other room.
Oh, okay.
So they squeezed the juices out of the bee, and they put the hard part back, and the mites weren't interested. Then they took the juices and they put it back on the bee, and the mites weren't interested. So they had to figure out what was going on here. They took that juice and they froze it. This is all scientific. I'll be very simple for the description. And they divided it into its separate parts. Fractions is what they refer to it as. Mm-hmm. And it split into 2 things. It split into a frozen solid and a liquor, which would not freeze. They put the liquor on. Mites not interested. They put the solid juice back on, and the mites went crazy over it. So now they know what it is that's attracting the mites.
Okay.
What Dr. Teal said was, the fascinating part is, now they have a repellent in the liquid part, and they have an attractant in the solid part, and they could use this as a push-pull system to do the same thing with the mites. And oh, by the way, it's made out of a natural product, which is the actual honeybee. So it's not like they have some methyl death product that they got it. They got it right from the bee. So I think they can go pretty far with this. This was a really cool session that he had. And if you go look up Dr. Teal, I found something on YouTube. I didn't watch it. Found it this morning before I went out. There's some presentation more about the science on this that was available from, I'm going to say, University of Florida presentation that he did last August. So I was really excited about that particular session of all the things I saw there.
Oh, it sounds good. Yeah, I mean, that Ross Conrad's book, have you read that? They've got a varroa trap in there. I'm wondering if you could use that in that to track the mites inside it. It's like it's basically like a frame with like steel on each side, so the mites get in, but they can't get out. Similar idea, it sounds like.
There's so many different ideas about the varroa mite. I was watching a YouTube video this morning. I went to a beekeeping meeting for the New Jersey State Beekeepers today, and while I was waiting for my ride, I found the Fat Bee Man had a video where he was saying if you take ground up, or no, it wasn't ground up, it was shavings from a planer of a certain type of wood and put it in your smoker, that it would kill the mites or be a deterrent. So there's still so much things to figure out when it comes to try and solve this varroa mite problem. And the New Jersey State Apiarist said today, still the #1 problem with all the things going on, CCD notwithstanding, is a varroa mite in New Jersey.
Yeah. Yeah, similar here, I think. The mites are still a big problem. How about in England, Phil?
Yeah, well, I hear conflicting stories. I don't find them too much of a problem. I've been keeping bees treatment-free now. Certainly, I didn't do any treatment that I can remember last season. I don't think I used even powdered sugar last season. The season before, I used a little bit of powdered sugar on some of the hives, but I've got a couple of hives, let me think. I've got three maybe, that I've had that will have gone through at least 2 complete seasons without any treatment at all. Now, of course, that doesn't mean I've solved the problem or anything like it. It may just mean that the mite load in those particular colonies is low enough that the bees can stay on top of it. But my whole approach these days is to work on the idea that what I'm trying to do is to create an environment in the hive that is maximally conducive to the bees and minimally conducive to any of their friends, or their enemies, should I say. But that means looking at what might be the friends of the bees, and just to bring in the name of my own charity. But what I mean by that, what I mean specifically by that, is that there are some bugs and some mites even that are known to be or believed to be beneficial to bees, and they live quite happily with the bees inside the hollow trees, and they're naturally occurring everywhere. Certainly in this country, there's a genus called Stratiolelaps, which is a favorite at the moment with some of the researchers, and what they're finding is that if you introduce these mites, the Stratiolelaps mites, to the hive, that they actually can do a pretty good job of controlling the varroa. So that's like one mite being used to control another mite, which is an approach that I totally approve of and would actively encourage.
Yeah, it sounds like, have you heard of pseudoscorpions? They apparently have a similar thing.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, very similar idea. Yeah, but the pseudoscorpions, I think I'm right in saying, aren't native to this country, whereas the Stratiolelaps mites are. So the point with it is that it doesn't involve introducing another species with unknown consequences. It means using what we've already got, what's already out there, and so what I'm doing is to, rather than regarding the hive as a sterile box that we have to kill everything in first before we can put the bees in, I'm treating it much more like a natural living hollow log style ecosystem. So I've been experimenting with this deep floor idea, and that seems to be working pretty well, because the deep floor contains some of the material that you would otherwise find on the forest floor or inside the hollow log, and that's what the Stratiolelaps and the earwigs and the woodlice, that's the sort of environment they like to live in. And I think those things are creatures that we know so little about, that we need to maybe encourage them a bit and just see how they get on, because they seem to get on perfectly happily with bees, and maybe they're just happy living together, and maybe they help each other out,
Oh, that sounds promising.
There was a session at AVF about that particular, the fauna and whatever inside the hive. They talked about the soft ceilings and the cushy floors, and specifically they were looking at the bacteria in the hive. And we just went to see Michael Bush recently. He's a well-known beekeeping naturalist. And his whole discussion was about how, for example, when you put sugar water in the hive, it changes the pH. Sugar water is not the same pH of honey. And it allows different things to grow in the hive that would never grow there. For example,
that's very true.
yeast will grow differently. And his expectation was that even essential oils and anything that you could put in the hive is messing with the ecosystem, and we should be going back to something more like what you're discussing, a natural floor, a natural ceiling, and just leave them be and let them live and build their ecology inside.
Absolutely. I have a lot of time for Michael Bush. I've read a lot of his stuff, and I've exchanged messages with him on forums and things. And you know, he always talks good sense, and I'm very happy to be guided by him on a lot of things.
Yeah, he's got a great website, hasn't he? He's got some really useful information on it.
Absolutely.
I think just about any time you encounter him and read his information, you say, that makes sense, or he typically provides enough backstory to explain himself. And we spent a whole day with him last week in Philadelphia, and just really a big fan of the presentation. I've seen, you know, I say this in a nice way, I think I mentioned this on my podcast, is that I've seen different beekeepers, they're just regurgitating what people have said, but he's actually, he's like a Randy Oliver. He's looking at the science and taking it one level.
Yeah. Apparently he's quite a good guitar player too.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
I have
Apparently
recordings of him singing from last week, actually. He sang three songs and I recorded them. So, yeah, he was pretty good, I have to say.
Cool. Yeah, I read Linda's Bee blog, and she had some photos of him playing his guitar, so quite
Linda
good.
Tillman, yeah.
Yeah, she's got a great blog too.
He was recorded the whole time. The Philadelphia Beekeeping Guild was the host for this. We went to, I guess, Northeast Philadelphia for it, and they recorded the whole session. I have to believe that they'll probably put that up on their website. And I also know that he went down in the Shenandoah Valley and did the presentation that we saw, and it's up on Vimeo. So if you're interested, you can find this stuff out there.
Sure.
Okay, we'll try and find that and add it to the show notes for the call. Yeah, and there's some good news in Europe, isn't there, Phil? With a lot of sort of Home Depot kind of stores are banning neonicotinoid pesticides, aren't they?
Well, it's starting to look hopeful. Yeah, there's a lot going on here at the moment, actually, because as you know, we're like it or not part of Europe, politically as well as geographically. And there is a movement, there's quite a strong movement in Europe, moving against the neonicotinoids. I mean, there's been a lot of research, and there's at least 30 pieces of scientific research has shown that neonicotinoids are damaging to bees. And despite, you know, Bayer still claiming that, you know, there's nothing to do with them and it's all the fault of the varroa mite, there's an awful lot of people that think that neonicotinoids are doing an awful lot of damage. So there's a lot of pressure from Europe, from other countries in Europe specifically, to have neonicotinoids banned across Europe. And of course, Bayer and Syngenta and the like are battling hard against that, because obviously that's going to undermine their profit margin somewhat. So we've got an interesting situation happening in the UK now, where some big stores, we have a B&Q, which is a big DIY store, and also Wix and Homebase, which are two other DIY stores, which also they tend to have garden departments in their stores. They have voluntarily come out and said that they're not going to sell any garden pesticides that contain neonicotinoids. So that's a really good first step. Now, the next thing we're trying to do is work on the supermarkets, because we have some big supermarket chains here, Tesco's and Sainsbury's, Waitrose and so on, that do sell some products still which contain neonicotinoids. So we're at the moment just putting some pressure on them to see if we can persuade them to join the DIY stores and get it again, not ban them, but just remove them from the shelves as a gesture of support for bees and beekeepers, until such time as we get a clear, ruling on the issue from the European Parliament. But the trouble is, our government, bless their hearts, have been also got at. They've been lobbied heavily by Bayer and Syngenta, and our government looks like voting against the European move to ban neonics. So there are, there's quite a big conflict going on at the moment. Towards the end of this month, there's going to be a vote in the European Parliament, which will settle the matter for the time being. But I suspect that our government will scupper the plan to ban neonics because they've been got at by the industry. So it's a big battle going on, and it's going to go on for a while yet because the amount of money involved behind the scenes is huge. Bayer made something like 35 billion euros, which equates to $35 billion, pretty much one for one. Just last year, just selling this stuff, so it's not small beer we're talking about.
So they can afford good lawyers then.
Oh yeah,
can't they?
Can they ever? Yeah.
Yeah. So if it was passed in the European Parliament, would that affect England as well?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, we pretty much have to do what we're told as far as being in Europe is concerned. I mean, there's a move at the moment to get us out of Europe, but that's a whole another story, But at the moment, if Europe passes a law, then we pretty much have to go with it. I think there are one or two exceptions that we can opt out of, but there's not much really.
Yeah, that's true.
It's fascinating to understand the different government approaches to these things because just the fact that they're considering it there, I never hear anybody considering it here. Here it's a foregone conclusion that unless you have some super condemning science, they're just not going there.
Yeah, I know we need to talk to our companies here about it because they're actually using Bayer's products in their pesticides. So, but they don't see any link apparently. So they, it's very hard to convince them. Yeah,
well, it's not an easy thing to spot, Go ahead.
What was it?
Go ahead, Kevin. There's been a lot of discussion about the fact that the problem is really about the delivery, right? Wasn't the original science for these things is once they're in the ground, they shouldn't really get a lot of impact to the bee. I know we talk about the sublethal. I know in the U.S. they're talking about solving the seed coating problem because the dust is coming off and going out. That's really where the exposures are coming from. But it's guttural that things are leaking juices out of the plant.
You see, the problem is that the neonicotinoids, the problem with them is that they are systemic, and that means that they start off on the seed coating, but they're taken up into the vascular system of the plant. They're drawn into the plant itself through the system that transport water and therefore nutrients around the plant. So those neonicotinoids end up in the leaves, in the stem, in the flower, in the pollen, in the nectar, in very small doses, but this stuff is incredibly toxic, The analogy that keeps coming up, and it's one I worked out some time ago, because I couldn't understand, when people talk in terms of parts per thousand, I can understand. Parts per million, I can just about, get a grasp on, but parts per billion is just like, well, you might as well be talking about astronomy, really. And but the way that that I figured out how to visualize it is that if you put 1 teaspoonful of this stuff, of clothianidin or imidacloprid, 1 teaspoonful or 5 milliliters into 1,000 metric tons of water, that equates to 5 parts per billion. So it's like a teaspoonful of stuff in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, if you like. That any drop of that liquid is capable of killing a bee. And the French experiments have found that 5 parts per billion will kill bees. Anything below that, between 1 and 5 parts per billion, will have irreversible effects on the nervous system of the bee, which disorientates them. And as everybody here knows, a disoriented bee is a dead bee. You know, a bee that can't find its way home is dead. You know, as good as straight away it's dead. So anything that is capable of disorientating a bee in quantities down to sort of 1 or 2 parts per billion has got to be one of the most toxic substances ever spread on the land, you know, really. And it's not the fact, I mean, the dust thing that's the thing that always comes up with the German experience back in May 2008 when they planted all that maize seed across Germany, across the Rhine Valley. And then, yes, there was dust. Dust came off the seed, and that created instant death right across. Something like 17,000 beekeepers were wiped out, I think, that day. And you know, millions and millions of bees dead, of course. But it's not so much those instant knockdown effects that we're concerned about. It's the fact that this stuff gets into the plant, into the flower, into the nectar, into the pollen, and then gets taken back to the hive. And because you've got, you know, maybe 50,000 workers concentrating that stuff into the small space that is the hive, that's where the toxic effect happens. And this is what, you know, we believe is causing the CCD issues, because it creates, you know, individually those little grains of microscopic grains of toxin that are out in the field may not do very much, but when they're all brought back into the hive and concentrated that way, that's what seems to be doing the damage. And you know, it's hard to get your head around just how toxic this stuff really is, but believe me, it's pretty amazingly powerful.
Yeah. Excuse me. And the other thing is the residual thing, isn't it? Because it stays in the ground for years and years, doesn't it? Doesn't break down.
Absolutely. Well, it does break down, but unfortunately, some of the breakdown products are even worse than the original chemicals that they put on there. You know.
That's pretty
cool. Yeah.
I know. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I heard if it gets into the waterways, it actually has been known to kill fish as well.
Definitely, yeah. Kills fish, kills birds, kills anything in its path. You know, it really is very toxic stuff.
Yeah. No, I think it'd be a good move to ban it, to be honest. Because I think there's areas in France. Yep. Sorry. I was going to say there's areas in France where they have stopped it in a reduced way, and the bees have actually come back apparently.
Yeah,
I
believe so. Yeah.
So that's proof, really, isn't it?
There was a discussion today from the New Jersey State Apiarist. He's been taking samples for the USDA, and he's been going around to hives and collecting the pollen. And I think I'm going to do this off the fly, so hopefully I don't get it wrong, but it was something like 2 to 11 pesticides found in a vast majority of the pollen, a high percentage. Right?
Yeah.
And if these pesticides are there, and the USDA, the problem, listen, I don't understand why people don't get it the European way, which is if there's in doubt, take it out until you prove it. In the USDA, you have to kill everything before, you know, and that's not a look. They do all their science or whatever, but, you know, to your point, if the leaves have guttural liquids on them and the bees are taking it in because they're thirsty, they're going to get it. And the fact that this sublethal dose thing has been out there so long and has been discussed since the beginning of CCD, but the methodology to trace it, track it, do something with it, it's just not there. The science hasn't caught up with the problem, and we're not going to solve this problem until the science catches up. And Michael Bush was saying last week that even the fluvalinate and the coumaphos that come, as they all know, everybody quotes it, it comes in the hive through the foundation. And it just seeps out of the foundation into all the wax. It's permeable. Sure. It just goes everywhere, right?
Sure.
They have to solve these problems. You can't put pesticides inside a box full of insects. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And the worst thing is, of course... Sorry to interrupt you. The worst thing is, of course, that I guess it's probably the same in America. Certainly, is what happens here is that at the end of the season, all the beekeepers put all their wax together and they send it off to a central place, and it gets put into a big pot and melted down again and turned back into foundation and redistributed around the country. You know, so whatever stuff that people choose to put on their bees, and it, you know, by all means ain't all legal. and certainly isn't all safe, all goes back into a big pot and gets spread around the country again in the foundation. You know, if you if you wanted to put together a crazy plan to wipe out bees, that would be one of the things you'd do, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it's almost like taking
absolutely.
them all to California to pollinate almonds.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's another good way of getting rid of them. And of course, the other thing that Bayer did, of course, was to persuade us that as soon as we got Varroa in this country, and I have my suspicions as to how it got here, but that's another story. But as soon as we got Varroa in this country, of course, we were told immediately to use pyrethroids made by Bayer to kill the Varroa mites. And of course, to start with, it kind of looked like it was working. And Bayer sold an awful lot of this stuff to beekeepers. And then, of course, at the same time, those same family of chemicals, the pyrethroids, were also being sprayed on the fields. This was before the neonicotinoids were widely used. So out in the fields there, the bees were getting a low-level dose of pyrethroids, picking up on the pollen and everything else, at the same time that they were being dosed with a higher dose of pyrethroids inside the hive. And so it came to pass, along with, I think, accompanied by some commercial beekeepers who decided that if leaving those strips inside the hive was 6 weeks was good, then leaving them in for 6 months must be better. So they subjected, yeah, right, exactly. So bees from two directions were being subject to low-level doses of medication. Yeah, and of course, what happens is as the Varroa reproduced rather rapidly, they adapted, and now, of course, what we've got is a whole lot of pyrethroid-resistant Varroa. So we've killed, thanks to Bayer, we've killed off all the weak mites, and we're now left with the tough mites that we can't kill.
Yeah.
So now everybody has to find a new solution to it, and you have to suspect. I mean, maybe I'm being paranoid here, but you have to wonder how Varroa spread around the country so damn quickly, how it got here in the first place, and considering how much money Bayer have made out of selling insecticides to beekeepers that didn't really work, you have to wonder if they didn't have a bigger hand in this whole thing than they're owning up to. But maybe that's just me being, a conspiracy theorist. Who knows?
Absolutely.
I could speak both sides of this, right? Because my hives literally sit 4 feet from a cornfield. I've talked to have a good relationship with the farmer. It's got gaucho in it. I mean, I know what he's planting, imidacloprid, right at my doorstep. And my bees have survived over and over. I do have foundation in my hives. It's got fluvalinate and I've seen vanishing of the bees. I know what this is all about, but me personally hasn't hit home yet, right? My bees are overwintering. Sure. If the bees are going to die, it's probably because I'm not a good beekeeper or doing crazy things like, my experiments of not feeding and stuff like that, right?
Well, it may be that, they've got enough other forage around that whatever the farmer's planting that's been treated isn't the main thing that they're being attracted to, and maybe they're just not picking up enough of it to cause them too much of an issue at the moment.
I think that's really key. Is I have a reasonable forage area, and when that corn is in tassel, they fly right over because there's something better for them, right?
Sure.
Everybody's experience can be different. If you're out in the middle of Iowa where there's nothing but corn, you could potentially be toast, right?
Sure.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, all this research? And, it's... Get rid of it, I say. That's my opinion, but... You got anything else to bring up, Kevin? Any other
just wanted to say that, Phil, I'm working on building one of your hives. I took your plans from your website. Thank you very much. I'm building my first top bar hive, and just looking to do some. I've been a beekeeper for a number of years as a backyard guy, and I know I can keep my bees surviving year after year. I know the conventional wisdom of how to do it. And now what I'm trying to do is branch out and learn different methodology and That's kind of what my podcast is about, is people following whatever I'm doing. Plus I bring whatever so first time I'm going to build a top bar hive. I happened to be fortunate enough to win a cedar hive at a beekeeping conference last October, so I'm going to put one of those in the yard. I just saw and shot some video of a dealer around here that's building ware hives. I'm going to consider that. You'll appreciate this, is that I asked the New Jersey State Apiarist this afternoon, what do you think about these hive form factors? I know that everybody has ubiquitous Langstroth, but what about the mite problems for those? And he kind of looked across the room funny at me. We have a good relationship. And he said, I really don't see that much difference. And then he went off to, it has to be movable comb. Wanted to make sure everybody knew that, because it's a requirement in New Jersey. But, yeah, I'll have to have a sidebar conversation with him, not in front of public, and ask him that question. But I'm just curious how people are faring. In your experience, for top bar hives or whatever, you see any difference in the mites and how they... I guess the best way to say it is, do they grow at the same rate as a Langstroth and all that? I was always curious about the form factor having any impact.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that there are so many variables, as you know. I mean, it's very hard to say unless you line up 50 hives of one type and 50 times of another type in the same sort of conditions with the same breed of bees, sister queens, all that kind of stuff. It's very hard to make those sort of judgments. But what I have noticed fairly consistently is that the top bar hives seem to need less feeding. They seem to look after themselves better. I've given all my hives. I mean, last year was rubbish here. The winter was the summer was appalling in this country last year. I mean, it was wet and cold and horrible. And I've noticed that the hives I've got that are on, I've still got a few framed hives that I run just to keep, just to make a comparison. Those hives all needed feeding. The top bar hives, I gave them some fondant going into winter just to make sure that they were okay, and they hardly seems to have touched it. By comparison with the framed hives, they're just not taking as much food. Now, I'm hoping that means that they've got enough of their own, and I'm hoping that means they're not just lazy or they can't be bothered to feed themselves. But we'll know in a month's time how they've done through the winter. But all I can say is that they seem to thrive in the top bar hives. I've got a couple of worries. No, I've only got one worry running at the moment. I have tried worries, and I intend to do more with worries just because I want to learn more about them. But they do seem to work best with Italian bees, because the Italian bees, as you know, have that they expand very rapidly, and they have that kind of strong urge to build comb, and they will build comb down through the boxes, whereas the northern European bees aren't quite so enthusiastic about comb building, and they seem to get stuck. A lot of people have said this. They seem to get stuck in the first or second box of the warre, and they won't just keep going building downwards like the Italians do. So, and I'm reluctant to get specifically Italian bees just for that purpose. I mean, we have quite a lot of Italian, bees with Italian blood around here, but because I'm only 5 or 6 miles from where Brother Adam used to have his, was raising his, the buckfast bees, of course. And this area is absolutely flooded with buckfast blood, which of course is really just a Italian northern bee cross, mainly. So we've got a lot of mongrels in the area. So what can I say? The mongrels seem to do well, The local mongrels seem to be okay. They seem to get by. The fancier breeds, I don't know. I don't have so much contact with them, but I get the impression that people who import bees, and I've seen people who've brought in New Zealand queens and things, they haven't really done that well around here, and
Oh, okay. Well, I guess it's because they're adapted to the local area, isn't it?
Well, that makes sense,
Yeah. I've got a question here from Paul Vandenbosch. He says, Is it ethical not to use any treatment on a new beehive? I'm starting at a new worry hive this year and not plan to treat the hive in any way. So what do you guys think?
Well, for what it's worth, I mean, I don't go around telling people not to treat. You know, I don't feel it's my business to tell people how to keep their bees. All I do is I try to keep doing experiments, and I keep trying to keep tabs on what other people are doing and finding out what works. I prefer personally not to use any synthetic chemicals in the hive, but I don't go around saying to people, you know, you shall not treat your bees, because, you know, I can't. People have to work out their own ethics, you know. I can't advise people on ethics. They have to work out themselves. It's like the question is, if you think your bees are going to suffer from not treating them, then maybe it's better to give them some kind of treatment, you know. If they're going to die without them being treated, then maybe you need to do something. On the other hand, maybe you could also say that maybe it's better to take a Darwinian approach and say, well, you know, if you're going to have a dozen colonies, then maybe 8 or 9 of them might die out, you know, and then maybe 8 or 9 of them get varroa and they can't handle it. But 3 or 4, maybe they have varroa. They almost certainly will. Well, they certainly will have varroa, but maybe they figure out a way to get by. So allowing the ones that can't cope to die out means that those genetic lines aren't perpetuated, and the stronger bees get to breed and carry on, and you breeding from stronger bees all the time, and that seems to make much more sense to me. You know, just treat them like any other animal.
Yeah, that's a good method to use. But I think a lot of backyard people are like devastated every time they lose a hive. So it's a hard thing to do.
If you've only got 1 or 2 hives, it's a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
How many hives do you have, right? And what can you afford? If you have 12 hives and you lose some of them, then you can do splits and make up for them. But if you have 2 hives and you don't treat, and you're going to lose them both. It also comes down to money for most folks. You know, look, somebody's going to solve this problem, and the right answer is to allow the bees to learn. But from an evolution standpoint, it's going to take a serious amount of time for them to get to the point where they can cohabitate with a mite. In the meantime, you're probably going to have to do something, or your hive's going to die. Do splits. That's a great way to break the brood cycle and keep the mites from going. Make nukes, follow the Michael Palmer method from Vermont, and do that. But if you have 1 or 2 hives and you have nothing, now I will say, I think the industry, you know, they had Coumaphos and fluvolinate way back when. It killed the mites, just killed them like nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
They're coming out with Apivar or I can't remember the name of the product. It's Amitraz, which is used a lot in the U.S., but it's not legal. You know, and then you have Apigard, and you have the Checkmite, which is formic acid. When you put those things in there, they're like bombs. They just nuke the whole hive. They do get into the comb, they kill the mites and whatever, but I've seen videos of some of these things with formic acid where there's so many dead bees out on the landing. And I guess the question is, whatever you can do to kill just enough mites so that the hive survives, but the bees learn to live with the mites, that's, I think, the best answer, right? These 99% kill of the mites, we think it's a great victory, but the fact of the matter is these bees better figure out how to live with the mites. They're not going away.
Sure.
Well, the other argument is if you're treating them, you're actually slowing down evolution, aren't you? Because you're actually using being like a crutch to them. So. And
the ones that are surviving are the strongest ones, to Phil's point earlier, right? So not only we're making the situation worse in some respects.
Yeah, I just don't think a bee industry is going to let half their hives die, are they? It's not going to happen.
Well, no, because as soon as you bring commercial interests into the equation, then you don't have a choice anymore, because who can afford to allow? I mean, we can maybe afford, if we're hobbyists and if we've got access to swarms and things, maybe we can allow 80% of our bees to die. But if you've got 10,000 colonies and that's your livelihood, you can't afford to let 8,000 of them die, for sure.
No, absolutely.
But then that brings up the whole question of, is commercial beekeeping really an ethical process in the first place? And that, it's as soon as you get into this argument, it becomes a very tricky one, because, while you can't say that anybody has a God-given right to be a commercial beekeeper. It's like nobody's born with a right to make a living out of bees, But some of these guys, especially in the States, have been keeping bees for generations, and it's heartbreaking to see them, looking at hundreds and hundreds and thousands of hives that have died out because of pesticide poisoning. But you think, well, is it really a good idea to drag bees 3,000 miles on the back of a truck across to the almonds, and then take them across to Maine for the blueberries and stuff? I mean, bees were never evolved to be treated like that, And on the way, feed them with high fructose corn syrup, and leave them in Wyoming for a few days to kind of in these enormous holding yards. Absolutely, it's not how bees were meant to be treated. And while I have a great sympathy for the guys who are losing their colonies, I keep thinking, well, what we really need here is a complete reform of agriculture. We need to rethink the whole process from the ground up, literally the ground up. We need to look at the soil. We need to look at the way soil is the basis of everything, and the life in the soil, including the microorganisms and the micronutrients, are the basis of everything on Earth. Literally, all life on Earth depends on the health of that soil. And what are we doing to it? We're tipping all these chemicals on it, we're tipping fertilizers on it, and herbicides on it, and insecticides on it, and then we're creating a situation where our farmers are literally addicted to chemicals. They cannot grow anything without using these chemicals, because the soil itself simply will not support life anymore. It's just, they've killed off all the microorganisms, they've killed off everything that lives in the soil, and now the soil is simply a structure in which, to support the roots of the plant, literally, and everything else has to come from a tanker and a spray, to keep it going. And that has got to be wrong. We've got to rethink this before it's too late.
Yeah.
It really is.
Well, the other problem is they're breeding super bugs as well, aren't they, and super weeds, so...
Oh, God, yes.
Just keep pour more and more chemicals into it. So
absolutely,
it's never ending, is it?
I had a quick question for you, Phil. What's your weather like there right now?
The weather right now, it's cold, fairly dry for a change, but we're hovering around freezing and maybe a couple of degrees over. In my part of England,
that's about where we are, right? We're in the same realm here in New Jersey as we have the same.
I would think similar, yeah. You probably get more snow than we do. We don't. Right down in the southwest of England, we rarely get much in the way of snow, except on high ground. But where I am now, we practically never get snow.
And Gary, I've been watching you guys are going gangbusters right now, right? You're in the middle or late summer for you. Your both your podcast and your Facebook page has just been exploding with all kinds of activity.
Oh yeah, it's actually, we're actually in a drought at the moment. There hasn't rained for about probably 4 weeks. So
yeah, really.
And some places up north haven't rained for 6 or 7 weeks. So it's quite bad. So there's not much flowers out there for the bees. So not good. Excuse me.
I've been working on my season, right? I'm building some nuke boxes, and I'm building the top bar hive, and I'm painting some equipment. I found on my property, my mother-in-law used to be a beekeeper when she lived here before we bought the house, and out in the old shed we found a whole fleet of medium boxes. So, and Michael Bush is a big fan of this. I'm going to switch to all mediums for a couple hives and try that out. Doesn't matter whether it's a honey super or not. And you could use that a lot like a Ware A, right? Where when you build your hive and when you want to open new space, you just tuck another one underneath and go with that. And I'm really looking forward to trying these different form factors and seeing what I get out of it.
I think it might be possible to run a Langstroth as a Ware A. I haven't tried it myself. I have tried running what we call a British National Hive as a Ware A. And what I found was, because certainly the Langstroth box is considerably bigger than the Ware box, and the National box is even quite a bit bigger than the Ware box, what I found is that it's very difficult to get the bees to move down, because they've got so much space, they can move sideways so easily that to get them to move down is quite difficult. And I suspect even in a Langstroth medium, you might still have that problem. that they'll live in one box, maybe two, but to get them to keep moving down and backfilling above them, I don't know. Maybe I might be completely wrong there, but I'd be very interested to see how it turns out.
Question. Because I asked that question, literally the one question I asked to Michael Bush, right? The prevailing wisdom here in our region is bees move up, right? So they always tell us in the fall, put your bees in the bottom, and that they will put the honey dome over top, and over winter they will use their stores and move up, and you'll find them underneath the bottom. In the spring, you take them and you put them right back down again. And the wisdom of this is if they have the open space over them, they're going to store the honey over them, and the queen won't move up and lay in your honey boxes, right? That's a typical Langstroth type of thing. Now, if you're doing a ware, they're talking about it moving down. If you're in the top bar, they're moving left or right, whatever you're doing. Where does a bee move? And Michael Bush's answer was, they'll move wherever there's space.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Michael, you can trust Michael to always come up with the perfect, simple, straightforward, common sense answer, you know, and that's exactly right. They do. They move where there's space, you know. If there's space above them, they'll use it. If there's space below them, they'll use that. If there's space either side of them, they'll use that, you know. And it's like he says, you know, everything works if you let it. It does.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. That's.
But not necessarily. But not necessarily the way you expect it to work. That's the thing.
Because you think they're going to do it the way they're going to do it.
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
absolutely the right answer.
Well, the bottom line is that bees don't read books about bees, do they? So
No,
you know,
no, probably a good
that.
thing.
Yeah. No, it's
One of the
interesting.
things we're going to do this year is we're going to, a friend of mine, and I was talking to the state apiarist about this, we're going to put scales underneath our hives. We're coming up with these just simple $12, you know, bathroom scale and put it underneath. And it's going to weigh so we know when the nectar flow is on. And we're going to try and find out how the data works. Like down in South Jersey, have they started yet? You know, it diversifies even just in our state, let alone across the mid-Atlantic region of New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, and so on. So we're all going to start our mini little experiment of putting different weighing our hives.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That'll be fun this year.
I'm hoping to do some experiments with different sensors in the hive. We've, I guess you probably heard there's this little baby computer called a Raspberry Pi that's just been out for about a year now. But I've just managed to get my hands on one at last, and it looks like it's got the potential for monitoring quite a few things that are going on in the hive and keeping track of them and actually logging the data. So I'm going to try and I've got to master the programming side of it yet, but I'm going to try and figure out to see if there's ways that we can use one of those to record the temperature variations and the humidity variations inside the hive, and also any other things that I can figure out how to keep track of. Weight might be. It's probably doable. It's possible to do that electronically using weight sensors in certain places in the hive. It must be possible to do that and actually track the weight alongside the other issues of temperature and humidity and so forth. That would be a very interesting thing to do, but technically it should be possible, but we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they say that the higher the humidity, the varroas don't breed as well, do they? So
that's right.
I've got a few theories about that. So, excuse me.
Well, that's the kind of core of my approach to it. Really, is allowing the bees to create an environment inside the hive that is perfect for them, and at the same time is antithetical to the varroa, because we know that from research that varroa won't reproduce above about 93 degrees Fahrenheit or about 32 centigrade, and so a combination of high temperature and high humidity inside the brood area is exactly what the bees need and want and will make of their own accord. And that itself, if it's allowed to remain constant, in other words, if you don't fiddle with it, if you don't interfere with it, or take the frames apart and so forth, if the bees can maintain that temperature and humidity, that should in itself have a detrimental effect on the varroa. But of course, the way beekeeping is generally taught over here is that you have to go through your hive every week to cut out queen cells to stop the thing swarming.
Yeah.
That's exactly what the bees don't want you to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Call the
Yeah, 'cause
seals,
we-
yeah, you have to interfere
Yeah.
with the environment all the time.
Yeah, Kevin said you break all the seals, all the propolis seals, and reduce the temperature and let the atmosphere out and everything. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we've been so busy building beehives for customers that we haven't had a chance to look at our bees for a while. So they're doing okay by themselves. So sometimes it's better to leave them alone, isn't it?
I think
Yeah.
leave them alone. If in doubt, leave them alone. That's the best way.
Yeah.
There's a beekeeper taking that premise in South America. His name is Oscar Perón.
Oh yeah, I know Oscar.
Right, and I've seen videos. I don't know if they come from
Yeah.
you or somebody else in UK who's taking this approach, right? And
There's a
thing is
yeah.
you
Go
build
ahead.
a chamber in the bottom, and you put the bees in the chamber, and then you put the boxes on the top, and you never interfere
right.
with the chamber at the bottom.
That's right.
And they
Yeah.
create their own ecology, and they control their humidity, and they control their heat. The other thing that he did was he changed the size of the cell, right? Small cell is supposed to... It came in vogue for a while, small cell, and then it went out because all the scientists said it wasn't there. But the key thing about small cell is the bees do not take as long to pupate, right? There's 21-day incubation period for that, but in small cell it's like 19 days, and it changes the length of time that the varroa has to reproduce inside the cell. So it's coming back in vogue, at least that's what I understand. And the other thing is about the space inside the hive. I think what his theory is that the conventional Langstroth hive, the dimensions are too big. If you close the dimensions, it increases the interior of the hive up a degree or 2 or 3. And as you were saying before, Phil, it changes the heat and the varroa can't tolerate it, right? So he's changing the way the hive construction is going with this Perón hive, and thinks the science is going to take care of the varroa problem now.
Yeah, I'm running a couple of modified dadants, a couple of old Brother Adam hives in a Perón style. In other words, I'm just allowing them to do what they like inside 3 brood boxes, and giving them all the space they need just to kind of build this huge nest, I hope. And the idea is, as you say, you put the supers on top, and then you just leave. I think you leave 1 super for the bees, and then you take what's above that. But I had one of them die out on me towards the end of last year, and I really don't know why. They seem to have absconded. But I think it's another approach, and it's worth it's anything that is worth experimenting with at the moment, really, to find out what the answer could possibly be. I understand that Oscar has gone into retirement. At least he seems to have disappeared from forums and things lately. But there are some people in this country experimenting with his approach. Yeah.
Yeah, he's been contributing to a forum that I'm on, and I haven't seen him in quite a while. But
yeah,
it could just be that they're in break right now, like us. And maybe.
Well, I had an email from him a few months ago now, I think it was, certainly before Christmas last year, saying that he was, it was slightly mysterious and a bit cryptic, saying that he was retiring, but sort of don't expect him to disappear altogether, kind of thing. But I hope he'll be back, and I hope he'll come up with new stuff.
Well, if anything, you planted
absolutely.
a seed, right?
Yeah.
Well, it was interesting. Last winter we had a hive with a quilt level on the top, and the varroa mites didn't actually reproduce hardly at all. So I was
Sorry, Gary. Say that again. You had a hive with what on the top?
Oh, it's got a quilt level. Like a
Quilt
worry
level.
hive has. Yeah, you know how a worry hive's got a quilt level.
Like a quilt.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. I got you. Yep.
Yeah, it's like we've got a bit of canvas on the bottom, and like sawdust or wood chips in it, and
Sure.
it's designed to get rid of the condensation. And I'm just thinking that because possibly the bees were colder because it was more ventilated, they actually clustered more, and the mites didn't breed as much. I mean, we're not scientists, but it's it definitely reduced the varroa mites. So it's interesting, isn't it? And it was the same. That was a hive that bounced dramatically back in the spring. So
Yeah, really.
I have those up on my. I created this box. I don't know if you've seen in the U.S. They sell them. A lot of the beekeeper catalogs sell this box that has 3 holes in the side, and it has a styrofoam insert, and it has a hole in the middle that you could pop out and put a feeder in, like an upside down jar.
okay,
I looked at that and said, one of the things that people discussed, so my first recollection is I bought a hive and it had a plastic top cover. And every time I moved that plastic top cover, there was a puddle on there. So I know that's a no-go, right? And then I saw a video with one of these boxes with the styrofoam on the top. And the premise was it was sitting next to a hive that had no styrofoam top, and the snow was all melted on the top of it. But the one with the styrofoam, the snow was 4 inches high. So I took the idea of a quilt box and the styrofoam. I built a deeper box. It has a queen excluder, plastic one, like a $2 one on the bottom. And in the top of it, it has styrofoam, and then there's an open chamber about 3 to 4 inches with a space between the styrofoam and the queen excluder. And I tore newspaper and I put it in there, and I have it sitting on top. And the premise is this: the warm, moist air will come up to the top, and if it hits the top and it's cold and condenses and drips, it will drip on the newspaper, and the newspaper will accept the moisture, and it won't drip back down on the hive, on the bees, and whatever. And I've been using these for the last
that makes
season,
sense.
and they seem to work pretty well.
yeah, we've had a lot of
Ugly,
success
but
with
they
them.
look-
Yeah,
They're ugly, but
they
they
look
work
funny.
well.
yeah. And the theory is that the water hits the tin roof, and the drips go on the sawdust or the newspaper, don't they? And they dry out through the holes. So yeah, we've had some success with that.
Well, I guess my approach is kind of similar to that, but I work on the basis that condensation will only happen on a cool surface. Yeah, cool in comparison to the air itself. So if the in a top bar hive, if the bars themselves have insulation above them, in other words, it's like there's a loft above them, as it were. As long as you've got that loft well insulated, the bars are going to be warmed by the fact that there are bees under there, generating some heat. So that the air is going to convect across the top bars, and then it's going to hit the sides of the hive, and that's where it's going to condense, and then it's going to run down the sides and run out the bottom. So that's the theory. I can't prove it yet. I haven't got a camera in there, but
what we're missing from a Langstroth hive is it's not a tree, right? A tree has a chamber in the side with the bark and the cambium, and the water flows through the water jacket in the tree, and all of that stuff kind of regulates the temperature. Langstroth hive has a 3/4 inch shell, and that's it. You know what I mean? So I've been saying this forever. Is one of the reasons I'm trying all these different hive form factors is at some point I want to go off and build a new hive, a different form factor. There's got to be. I don't understand why people haven't tried to take on improving the Langstroth hive in the ability of heat management, ventilation, and all this other stuff. And maybe, Phil, you've seen these at the ABF show in Hershey. They had styrofoam boxes.
Yeah, I've seen them being used
for a long time, but they're new ones.
Yeah.
They're made out of a harder, denser styrofoam. They almost can't pinch them and squeeze them. And then they took the stuff that you put in a bed liner, that black tarry stuff that is supposed to prevent a bed liner, and they sprayed them with these to make them impervious.
Right.
And I have to wonder, I'm so fascinated to go buy one of these things, like everything else, and try one and see how they work. I know a beekeeper who used the previous form factor styrofoam ones. The squirrels ate them. The ants got through. It was a disaster. They didn't work. The skunks ate them and whatever. I don't know if these would suffer the same fate, but it'd be interesting to know whether they regulate the temperature differently.
I think they do. I've seen them in use. I visited I did a podcast interview with a Scottish beekeeper called Murray McGregor, who uses these hives routinely now, with with a breed of bee that's actually raised in New Zealand, funnily enough, but it's a northern European bee that's raised over winter in New Zealand. But I must say, I was skeptical at first, and I still have a lot of reservations from the environmental point of view about using styrofoam because of the toxic products given off when it's being made and so forth, and the difficulty of disposing with it afterwards. But aside from that, what it does do is create a very well insulated container, and I think that's what bees really like to have, you know. And your average hollow tree probably has, you know, 2 or 3 inches of rotten wood around it, you know, which is a really, really good insulator, and it's got like any number of feet of timber directly above it, which is a perfect insulator. And so to put them inside a box made of 1/2-inch timber or whatever, it's just like so not like a hollow tree, that which is why I always recommend people use at least inch thick timber to build their hives, just to give them that extra little bit of insulation. But you're quite right. You know, you can't compare any beehive to a hollow tree, unless of course it is a hollow tree, because there are people in southwest France still using hollow chestnut logs, you know, as hives, and they work very well.
Yeah, I've seen photos of those. They're fascinating, aren't they?
Yeah.
Must be hard to move them, but.
You have to think the styrofoam hives. So the common thing is in the wintertime, the hive is not the same temperature as, you know, it's not 98 degrees in there. It's whatever the ambient temperature is, and then in a bubble around the actual, around the cluster itself is where the heat is, and they generate.
Oh yeah,
it.
absolutely.
You would think inside that they would probably maintain the temperature a little more consistently inside. And it's all about the amount of resources, right? Every one of those bees that's in there doing aerobics to try and keep the cluster warm and generate that heat, the less heat they have to generate, the more chance they have for survival.
For sure, and the less food they eat.
In summertime, they maintain the heat by bringing in moisture and evaporating it like an air conditioner or whatever. So they completely can climate control it. And if you can keep the fluctuation up and down for when it's super hot out or super cold out, it just seems like there's got to be a better way to maintain the environment inside the hive for them.
For sure, yeah, and that brings me, you know, to what I said really, you know, in my opening remarks. Really, is that creating a space that the bees can really control themselves is the way I'm working now. It's really, you know, going for that in every possible way. In terms of insulation, in terms of the thickness of the timber used, in terms of creating an environment where other things can live, because, you know, again, a possible issue with the styrofoam is that it is pretty much a sterile environment. Nothing else as much is going to live in there alongside the bees, because there's no little nooks and crannies for them to kind of crawl into. So that might be an issue, I don't know. But maybe you can get around that by having a box of sawdust or something at the bottom of the styrofoam hive, you know, where all those things can live. You know, there's all sorts of possibilities we haven't investigated yet.
Yeah, I think the original Langstroth hive actually was double skinned anyway, wasn't it? Yeah, the original design. I think
the one I've seen pictures of, the one I've seen pictures of had kind of hinged parts. It was like that seemed to be like in three hinged sections. I haven't tried to recreate one of those, but I think you're right. I think because it was designed with sections in mind, I think, wasn't it, originally, rather than
it was a double wall. Lorenzo Langstroth's original design was double wall, and it also he had some sort of his vision was that there was some sort of embankment that the hive sat up under, and he was channeling air underneath to an airflow, some sort of airflow thing. You can download that book. It's a free audiobook, and I listened to it a couple times. And there is that whole aspect of he had a double wall hive with an insulation space in between, and he was providing ventilation underneath. So he got it. We just moved away from it for commercialization, I think.
Sure.
Also, he had like a mesh put underneath, did he? Kind of thing.
He had it up on an embankment so that air could flow underneath the hive and around it, was my take on what I heard.
Yeah, I think the design has changed to make it easier to move them and, you know, more commercial uses, aren't they?
Oh, it's been
over time.
simplified, definitely. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
It is an
Gary,
efficient system. I mean, you got to say it is. It is what it is.
Sure.
Yep.
Absolutely.
What was that, Phil?
Gary, you've got a note saying that we have a question. Was that one we've already dealt with, or?
Oh, that was the one from.
Okay.
Yeah, we've dealt with that guy. Yeah.
Mm.
That was from Paul Vandenbosch. Yeah. I just asked about if anyone else has got any questions, and no one's come back. So.
Okay. Well, something I get asked a lot is where do you get bees from? And I was just wondering if you guys do you have much in the way of natural swarms around you? When I say natural, I mean, swarms that occur whether they come from beehives or whether they come from hollow trees. But do you have much going on in the way of swarm catching in the season?
Yeah, we do, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
The beginning of the season, we had 4 in 2 days, so it's full on. But it hasn't. It's stopped now. It's we do get a lot of swarms, especially in suburban areas where people have hives in their backyard and they don't look after them properly, and they all split off. But I mean, a swarming hive is a good sign, really. It means they're healthy, doesn't it?
Well, I would say so. Yeah.
Yep.
What about you, Kevin? Do you get much in the way of natural swarms around you?
I hear beekeepers all the time talking about collecting swarms and swarms and swarms. I've only seen 2 in the last number of years in my area. I have a commercial guy has a couple dozen hives right like a mile and something from my apiary, and I think I've 3, maybe 4 in my neighborhood in the last 3 years. So,
okay.
but there's other people who talk about collecting, 20 a week sometimes when the season's really going.
Yeah.
I've been trying not to let my hives swarm. I've been splitting them and doing whatever management. The other thing is I might be blissfully unaware, right? Because I go to work during the day, and if they're swarming, and good for them.
No, it happens.
Populating nature, right? Which is always
absolutely.
You can tell, but because you inspect it 1 week, and then 2 weeks later you inspect it, and half the bees are gone.
I see it this way: as long as they're not hanging off my neighbor's eaves, I'm okay. Right?
Yeah,
if they call me and the bees are in their garage or something like that, then I guess they do a little better job at managing.
Or hanging on their wing mirror and they want to go to work. Yeah, I've seen that before.
Hanging off their mailbox or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you get many natural swarms where you live, Phil, or is it not really?
We do, we do get a lot of swarms actually. Last year it was concentrated into quite a narrow gap because we had such rubbish weather that it's like the bees just waited for the first bit of sun and they all just decided to swarm, pretty much in the same week. And we literally had, I think in 1 week we must have had probably over 20 swarms within 10 miles of here. That's the ones I know about. I mean, those are the ones that called me. There would have been a lot more than that didn't call me. So,
yeah.
But there's a lot of beekeepers in this area. We're a small country and we're quite heavily populated. And I live in an area which is not overly heavily populated, but there's quite a few beekeepers here because the climate's quite good for it. And as I said, Brother Adam's operation was only 6-7 miles away, and we've got and Devon is the oldest beekeeping association in the country. I think I'm right in saying. So there are a lot of beekeepers around here, and some of them are going to have swarms. There's no question. So we do get a lot, and that's good. I think the more swarms the better, really, because as Kevin said, it's giving them a chance to find somewhere out in the woods to live, and those bees are going to be the genetic pool that we draw on in future years. The survivors.
Absolutely. I've noticed this year we've had a lot of people complaining that bees are living in their roofs, which is something new. I've had about 4 or 5 complaints. So, but I tend not to take those on because I think then you become responsible for the building of their house.
Yeah, it's a tricky one.
It's hard to do.
Yeah.
Given the brother factor there by you, is there public programs to educate people on how important that area is?
No. No, nothing in the way of a public program, but
Blissfully unaware,
there's. Oh yeah, yeah. Even the Abbey, to be honest, I don't think they value their heritage as much as they should. You know, they really should have a decent, museum there. I think with all of Brother Adam's old equipment in it. You know, because I worked there for a year and we used a lot of his stuff, and we used his old beekeeping hat and his cassock were hanging up in the cupboard there, and they've been there for years. Who knows where they are now? But all that stuff, that really should have been preserved and looked after. I don't know. I hope it has been.
The Lorenzo Langstroth was from Philadelphia, and they had a little plaque and a sign, and they just celebrated an anniversary there, the Philadelphia Beekeepers Guild, but that's all there is. This is where he lived, and here's the sign.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably more than Brother Adam's got, to be honest. I mean, he's buried in the Abbey's grounds, and you can visit his grave, but there's no big signs up anywhere saying. No, they got a little exhibition, I think, there, but it's well out of date. So last time I saw it, it was.
Yeah. Because when did he pass away? It was not that long ago, eh? It's quite.
Oh, it was back in, I think it was about 1992 or 3, around that time. He died. I never met him, sadly. I'd love to have met him now, but in those days I wasn't really that interested in beekeeping. So, it's before the time I got that interested in it. So.
Oh, okay.
There you go. But I do know his a guy who worked with him for many years, Peter Donovan. And also Brother Daniel at the Abbey, who worked with Brother Adam for many years, and I've met and spoken to both of them, and found out quite a lot about him from them. So I've got kind of, if not first-hand, at least second-hand knowledge of some of his stuff.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, because wasn't Langstroth Reverend as well? Excuse me. What was that?
That is neat, though. That you're right there immersed. I mean, as a beekeeper, you can appreciate it, right?
Sure, yeah. I can now, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, guys, well, do we wrap that up now? Do you want to do something else, Kevin or Phil?
I haven't actually heard Kevin's podcast yet. I have to own up to that. I've listened to some of yours, Gary, but I haven't actually listened to Kevin's yet. So I'd like to know the web address for your podcast, please, Kevin.
We could do that. Yeah.
www.bkcorner.org stands for
bkcorner.org. bkcorner.org. Okay. And are you on iTunes?
I am. Yeah.
Okay, good. I'll look for you on iTunes as well.
Thanks to Gary. And, one of the things I was listening to your podcast, Phil, recently, where you interviewed the person with the discs. That was fascinating, by the way.
Yeah, that was
listening to your...
Remind me, the person with the discs.
The person who had the discs next to the hive that changed the energy.
Oh, Valerie. Yes, Valerie Solheim. Yes. Yeah, I interviewed her when I was over in the States last November in Denver, Colorado. And I mean, I don't know whether is there something in that. I hope there is. I kind of hope there is. When I first heard about it, I kind of thought, oh, well, this is really bizarre. I thought, but talking to her and listening to her and thinking it through and thinking, well, maybe there's something in it, I'd certainly like to hear more about it.
Science, right? Put a control on it.
Well, you have to at some point.
Like that need to know, right? So that they can.
Yeah.
How could you be credible without having a way to present it that people who would evaluate you would say, yes, that makes sense, or whatever. But it was a fascinating topic. I started thinking about like Nazca lines and all that other stuff, right? It does make you think.
Mm-hmm. Well, if it works, I mean, do it.
Our podcasts are completely different, right? So you do a lot of interviews and you do some commentary. Gary, you're with Margaret doing your teamwork thing, and I'm talking about stuff that we got going on just generally in our association and personally in my backyard. And we do have different styles. I don't think I have very few interviews, although I'd like to change that at some point. But it is neat that the three of us, I think, are the most active podcasters going. I don't know of any other, how would you say it, like, you know, Craig from Maryland, he used to
That's
do
Craig,
it, but
yeah,
he's
yeah.
not been around much. We're really the only active ones, and we all have complementary styles. 3 different places. I think it's great. I refer people to your podcasts, both of you, all the time. So.
Well, thank you.
Oh, thanks, Kevin.
Well, I should definitely be listening to yours, Kevin. I've been very bad about keeping track of other people's podcasts all the time. I have been listening to Craig's, and he did come back recently, didn't he? He did a bit of a comeback at the beginning of the year because he'd had a long
He did a
time off.
31st issue, and I think that's then he fell by the wayside. So maybe,
Has that been it again so far? Okay.
He'll come back in.
Sure.
Yeah, he's got.
I'm hoping to make mine more
podcast,
regular,
yeah.
but, you know, yeah. I'm hoping to do more, but it's just finding the time to fit everything in. You know, I've got stuff stacked up waiting for me to give attention to. I've got videos to edit from last year. I've got books to finish, and man, you know, it's so hard to fit it all in.
Yeah, we've only got 168 hours each, haven't we, every week? So.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, some of those I have to sleep.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Got to have some fun as well, don't you? Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, sort of tell me. I sort of vaguely remember fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I do this just enough to make sure that I keep it fun, right? I don't know if I'd become a professional at this because, you know, it would just lose its charm. You do it to the extent that you want.
Can.
Sometimes it gets burdening, like you said, Phil. I have stacks of videos and whatever. I shoot a lot for a video, for a YouTube channel that we maintain, and there's never a want for things to do to media, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to say that I've got a lot of teaching work to do this year. I've got pretty much every other weekend right through the summer, right through till September. I'm out teaching somewhere, and which is great. I really enjoy teaching, and I mean the best thing is you get to meet other people that are doing stuff, you know, and get to talk to them and learn from them. And the one thing that's, I suppose, if there's a bit of big news, it would be that I was invited to teach at Highgrove, which is Prince Charles's residence in Gloucestershire. So I'm hoping to get a little badge for my car saying, you know, by royal appointment.
Wow,
yeah, absolutely.
Maybe one day, you know, it won't happen, but whatever. But what's great is that, you know, that he has actually recognised the existence of natural beekeeping. It has been recognised at that level, and you know that it's kind of a, if you like, a semi-official acknowledgement that we're not completely barking mad.
Exactly. Yeah, he was here. He was here with Camilla recently, and they went visited some bee stuff as well. Did some bee stuff here, so.
Right.
I've seen some photos, but I wasn't actually there. But that's fantastic, Phil, that you can, you know,
well,
get
I'm
out there
hoping
and
to
teach,
bump into him in the garden one day, you know, when I'm up there. But we'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do a podcast interview. How about that?
That's
exactly.
the way to do it. Always land the interview, right?
Yeah, just keep that tape deck in your back pocket all the time.
Oh yeah,
you never know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so where can people get hold of your podcast, Phil? You're on iTunes and everything?
Yeah, it's on iTunes. Just look up the Barefoot Beekeeper. You'll find it on iTunes. It's on. I use Libsyn. Do you use? I guess you guys probably do as well. Liberated syndication.
Yeah,
for the actual,
I've used Libsyn.
So you know, biobees.libsyn.com, or just go to iTunes and look it up there. But there's
Okay.
I do an RSS feed to my website as well, so the latest one should appear automatically on the website with any luck.
Yeah, because you're at buyerbees.com, is that right?
That's right.
your
Yeah.
main website. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, we'll stay online there, guys, but we'll just end the broadcast. And
Okay.
so, got anything else to say there, Kevin? No?
Nope.
Okay, we're all right. Okay,
Enjoyed
well,
this.
thanks everyone for joining us. Yeah, no, me too. Thanks everyone for joining
Yeah, good
us.
to meet you
and,
guys.
yeah, absolutely. And we'll probably do another talk at some other point. So you guys stay on the line, I'll just end this broadcast.